Um, 2 weeks ago, the conversation that we had, I was, I was deeply impacted by it. I was really impressed, actually, with the openness of heart and the freedom of thought um, that we enjoy and that we are exploring. So I thought I would start this morning with excerpts from words that some of you offered 2 weeks ago. Um, just little clips from what some of you shared. Ruth helped to launch our conversation. She said, "We love our child so much. I think it really highlights the unfathomable love that God has for all of his creation, all of his people, all of his everything. Because we love our child with all of our heart, and how much more does God love us?" Which is sure, which is such a well known saying. And yet, when you feel this, when you experience this, you see how much you love your child still, or in spite of, or because of their strength and their endurance. It just really highlights how God created us all so uniquely and loves every bit of us, every one of us, and all of our uniqueness. And that's beautiful. Caroline noted, she said, "I just love how you link the anti capitalist message with queerness, and that just resonates with me." Dr. Dave spoke about his Chinese American friend who has a gay son. David said, he has a daughter who goes to an evangelical church that doesn't approve of gay folk. And he talked to me about it at one point. It wasn't even what he said, but how he said it. He was just disgusted that a sister had rejected her brother because of this teaching of her church. And he just said, "Well, stupid belief that you should hate gay folk and reject them." And it was really how he said it that got to me. Barbara said, "I think we're losing a whole generation of people because we're not progressing quickly enough in our embracing of all. And it kind of scares me. But on the other hand, I have hope that maybe it's morphing into something different. But I'm telling you that nobody under 25 in my world, just like my boys' world, it's like they're seeing this so different in a very big way. Their framework is different." Kalan said, "Our faith is queer, right? In the sense, if you want to look at a faith and say, man, there's some odd things there. Some things to our faith basically combines and redeems in hopeful ways. How else would you describe it other than queer, right?" Kalan went on to agree with Barbara. Our two are 23 and 22. So they're the under 25 demographic. And nieces and nephews continue the whole question. What we've seen, or what I've seen, is that it's sort of this: why are we still talking about this? And then Eli, referring to the term queer, said, "I would say it's similar to how the black community has reclaimed the N word to be more like friendly because now it's in their power." Shella spoke about her earlier ignorance and said, "If I can change, then I'm sure anyone can change." And she continued, "Just like I think we need to look at this whole situation in the world in a more humanistic way." And she referred to Angelique, saying that she was able to see my humanity. And now I just see humanity in all this because I work with people who are queer, and I love it. Rosie said, "But we've got a long way to go. I know within my family, even me, I have some nieces and nephews who are like, no, no, if you were born a boy or if you were born a girl, then that's just what God made you, and zip it. There's nothing else to it, right?" Brigitta said, "Sometimes I think that people refer to the church, but we are the church. And then Julia said, if we are the church, then the church is queer. Then Angelique said, but you know, if anyone was one of those people, those uber religious, back in the day, and you were, saying being gay is wrong and you need conversion therapy, stuff like that. When it comes from a place of ignorance, that's easy to forgive. It really is, right? You know better. If you know better, you'll do better. But it's specifically those ones that I feel like they understand. This is not how it's supposed to be, but like you said, capitalism. And then Kenichi closed our time with communion and said, I began to think, what if, because of colonialism and how much we have been colonized, we think the exact opposite, that the binary is the normal and that the queerness is the absurd, when it's the other way around? What if the binary is not the normal? One of the texts that I have come to appreciate is titled Queer Virtue: What LGBTQ People Know About Life and Love and How It Can Revitalize Christianity. And here's some notes. Okay, so our granddaughter just shows up in the most unusual places. That's okay. So Christianity's three distinguishing truths, truth claims. Before I read these, let me just say that 2 weeks ago, I shared the story of Joseph from the perspective of a queer church. And let me just say that I didn't emphasize, I felt like I just didn't say enough about this, but I'll just drop it on you right now just to consider. Joseph became a source of salvation for his family and for the nation of Egypt. I think that there's a statement being made in that those who are excluded, those who are killed, if you will, because they left his father with the impression that he was dead, that there's hope in their vision for all of us. And so this title, What LGBTQ People Know About Life and Love and How It Can Revitalize Christianity, I think queer folk can revitalize just about anything collectively. But look at these three distinguishing truth claims that basically distinguish Christianity from every other faith tradition. Number one, that God came to earth in the person of Jesus Christ. Number two, that Jesus Christ was killed, died, and rose from the dead. And number three, that it is possible for any human being to perceive these truths and to join or form a community that worships this God following the ethical path laid out by Jesus. So together, these three assertions, they rupture binaries that have been thought to be inviolable. They don't just disrupt binaries, they dramatically and decisively rupture binaries. The first one, that God came to earth in the person of Jesus Christ. In many traditions before Jesus, many gods were believed to be able to pose as mortals, and human beings were thought to be made in God's image, reflecting the divine. Some god collections, some pantheons included demigods who were half human and half God, but whose partial humanity impeded their divine power. However, Christianity asserted something different. Early church leaders declared that Jesus Christ was fully God and fully human. grappling with the question of who Jesus was and how he was composed. This means that God and humanity are fundamentally distinct from each other, as Jesus was both fully divine and fully human at the same time. Now, this second uh, truth claim, that Jesus was killed, died, and rose from the dead. Many people see life and death as opposites. On a deeper level, this opposition may be rooted in the difference between God and humans. God, being immortal, is always alive and never dies. People, on the other hand, are mortal, and death is something that we can't avoid. But Christianity challenges this idea by teaching that Jesus, who was fully divine and fully human, actually died and came back to life, which means that death is not the end for us and that it is an essential part of living a meaningful life. In Christianity, life and death are not separate, but exist in dynamic tension, constantly influencing each other. This is what makes Christian liberation so profound, because it shows that even in our darkest moments, God is with us and that death is never the final word for us. And then there's this third one, that it is possible for any human being to perceive these truths and to join or form a community that worships this God following the ethical path laid out by Jesus. That religious belief and practice are part and parcel of tribal, ethnic, or national identity is challenged. Staking out boundaries that are crossed at the expense of family bonds, social cohesion, and moral rectitude. But Christianity believes that every individual can connect with God through Jesus Christ and experience salvation, and it encourages building a supportive faith community. People are invited to join or create a community that aligns with their identity and values. This community lives by an ethical code based on the teachings of Jesus, emphasizing love, emphasizing compassion, emphasizing forgiveness. So we look at Christ as the one who broke down cosmic forces, and we proclaim that. So it disrupts, it ruptures binary thinking. And I just want to say that binary thinking does more harm in the world than anything I can think of. And if you can find a problem, it's very likely that not far from that problem is the cause of binary thinking. We read moments ago about the friendship between David and Jonathan. And I grew up listening to and reading that story. It was interesting that in the church world that I grew up in, it was always qualified. If we were in a Sunday school class or whatever, and David and Jonathan's friendship was mentioned, we couldn't just let it be. We couldn't just, we had to heterosplain their relationship. We had to say, we had to make sure that everybody knew that it was trying to say something different from what it was actually saying. We again had to heterosplain this love that surpassed the love of women, in David's words. And this is really descriptive. It informs of how binary thinking tries to control all of us. And my prayer is that all of us will find ways to challenge binaries. Binaries are the opposite of the non-dual. Binaries are what constitute dualistic thinking. The Franciscan monk Richard Rohr explains non-dualistic thinking as anything that resists a simple definition. It seeks subtleties. That's what non-dualism does. It seeks subtleties, exceptions, mystery, and a bigger picture. Non-dualistic thinking refers to a broader, dynamic, imaginative, and more mature contemplation of perceived events. Unlike the way that I grew up being taught about David and Jonathan, we just couldn't let it be. we will create healthier communities, healthier churches, healthier world if we can just let it be. And when the brokenhearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer. Let it be. For though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer. Let it be. The queer community is known for non-dual relations. And one of the ways this is evidenced in the queer community is by the spirit of hospitality. This is something we could all be tutored in. We could all learn from the queer community, especially churches. We could learn more about hospitality. Hospitality really is the answer to our community's problems, our planet's problems. We need, and you know what, there's a yearning inside of us to experience and to give hospitality, but there are systems in place that try to keep us from being hospitable. We buy, we sell, but we don't share. I mean, how many times do you have something that you possibly don't have room for? You got to throw it away. You don't know what to do with it. Oh, maybe I'll take it to the local Goodwill or something like that. But we don't really exchange with one another. And ironically, hospitality is what churches are for. And hopefully every one of us, because of our relationships with each other, is inspired to become even more hospitable. You can probably think of ways that you can be more hospitable, that we can be more hospitable. Jesus says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Anybody who knows anything about Jesus, I mean, they can be atheists or agnostic or participate in some faith practice. Anybody who knows anything about Jesus knows that Christians are hospitable. And this is the problem. This is why we need queer leadership. Now, somebody might say, no, I'm not talking about you, but some people might say, no, we don't need queer leadership. We just need token queer folks because it makes us look accepting. But look, LGBTQ plus folks have had it up to here with microaggressions. And until we are on the listening end who are cis hetero, until we are on the listening end, on the receiving end of wisdom, then they just don't necessarily have the time, the energy to put up with those who are not queer. They don't need to be part of a community that boasts, oh, we have queer folks in our church, or working in our company, or in our whatever. This spirit of hospitality that we need to learn, we need to be infused with, that we need to be transformed by. There's an impulse in us that wants this hospitality, that wants to feel safer with one another, that doesn't want to get pushed around by people's ego. There's something in us that doesn't want to push other people around with our egos. This is true for LGBTQ folks, but it's true for all of us, but it's particularly true for anybody who's powerless. People who come short of society's standards of acceptability. Anyone who is not one of the beautiful people. People with disabilities. People who are obese. People who are elderly. Black, indigenous, and other people of color. Some 20 years ago, back in the time when Sayuri and Kenichi lived here in Santa Barbara, and so they weren't quite newlyweds. Maybe they were kind of newlyweds at this time. And they used to bring lots of friends to church, Japanese friends. And I'll never forget, there was a young lady by the name of Candy. She was she had been severely burned, possibly beyond recognition, facially burned, her whole body, but particularly her face. And I know I've asked Kenichi and Suri because they've lost track of her too. And I've wondered sometimes if maybe I failed her. I I was hoping that Candy could become the face of our church. It would be a test of the spirit of hospitality. If we really are being church. I'm really interested in the people for the powerless, those who come short of society's standards of acceptability. And I pray that we can rise to the challenge of practicing hospitality in our lives, in our communities. If we can honor the hospitality of the people who perhaps live in our neighborhoods when they reach out to us. If we can honor the hospitality that happens in our church. I hope we can practice hospitality. And when I say practice hospitality, I mean get better at it, practice it. We can get rusty. Yeah, we can get rusty at this. We can become harried and hurried. So let's talk about it.
This is such a great concept to kind of blow away all of our traditional ways that we grew up, right? Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to? Because I have some notes, but you always have such profound notes.
Thanks. I felt the same way about you. Excuse my voice. I'm sick, so but I was thinking of all the Bible stories that I associate with this conversation. And one of them, of course, is in Acts, where Peter is going to see the very wealthy sorry, I haven't read the story in a while, the very wealthy Gentile. And he is invited to go there, and he has this vision, and God has this big table, this big covering that is lowered from the heavens, and on it are all the unclean animals. And Peter says, no, I can't do this, these are unclean. And God says, what I have said is clean, you cannot say is unclean. I know I'm paraphrasing it, but basically God's saying, hold on. What is unclean is unclean. What is clean is clean. You cannot tell me as God who is unclean and who is clean. And so that totally makes me think of the progressiveness that Jesus was trying to get the world to. Like, he would treat women like human beings. That was a totally out of the world concept when he talked to that woman at the well. She knew he was doing something that nobody did. She said, what are you doing talking to me? You're not even supposed to talk to me because I'm a Samaritan and I'm a woman and I've slept with more than one man. And what are you doing talking to me? And he said, you're my girl. You're my girl. You are the girl that I came here for. And so I'm reminded of those things. I'm also reminded of when Jesus tells the Pharisees that the prostitutes and the tax gatherers will see paradise before you. And he's saying, I feel like every time I read that, I see him saying, I don't care who you've slept with. I don't care how many people you've slept with. I don't care, whatever. If you are kind, you are my person. And I don't care, if you're a tax gatherer, that's like, I don't know, somebody who, I don't know where that would verify. I don't know what that would be in our present conversation. But he says, you know what? I'm not looking at what you do. I'm looking at who you are. I'm not looking at the profession you are or what you are looked at by other people, but I see you as the human being, like you said, that God created and loved so much. It's like anybody who tries to put a kind of label on you is not for me. And I read this thing. There was a comment going around that I just read that Jesus is everyone you exclude, and everyone you exclude is Jesus. Mm. And so I really liked that. So, but yeah, you know what? I just wanted to throw those out there and see what people thought. I have some other ideas, but see if anybody wants to take those for a run.
If I could jump in on how you use that one story, not story, but what happened with Peter and the wealthy Gentile. I feel like the same thing, kind of like when the veil was torn to the Holy of Holies. I just feel like if we could look at every look at scripture, look at what happened after Jesus died, like in that light, I think that would be really great for all of us, right? To see how God destroyed binaries, to show that it's for all. I just wanted to share something. I have like when I went to school, there was a professor that was gay, and he was teaching like a multicultural class that all of us had to have, and he said he just wanted everyone to know that he was born marginalized in a sense because everyone in his family was hetero, and he they didn't know he was gay right away, but the essence of who he was, he identified already as being not the majority, who he was. And so that was one of the things that he said is that you'll find that most people who identify as queer, they totally understand the struggle of all minorities, people of color, because that's who they are. That was the essence. So I think that that's a great thing that you brought up about the compassion and the hospitality, because they do have a different, maybe if everyone in their family was hetero, they do have a different experience maybe than other people.
That's a good point. And they all the more reason need for us to make an effort to include them, because they have that feeling of disconnect and that feeling of exclusion, and like people are looking at them differently. And so yeah, that totally resonates. Caroline, you have your hand up.
Hi. It's funny. I was just, Lisa, what you were saying about women and the women at the well sort of reminded me. I used to work in music in a music agency, and one of our clients was Mattis Yahoo, who I think David's played Mattis Yahoo a few times. I think he's Hasidic. I can't remember if he's Hasidic or Orthodox, but Hasidic, he came into the office, and I was so excited to meet him because I love his music. And I went up, just put out my hand. And not only would he not look me in the eyes, but he turned away because he wouldn't shake my hand, because it's offensive to him to touch a woman that's not his wife. And it's funny. It was like a real moment of like empathy for every marginalized group that's ever existed. Because I was like, wow, this sucks. Here I am being singled out because of something that's not, nothing to do with my actions or my character, and rejected in front of a group of people. And I was like, really, really sucked. I was like, wow, well, there you go. That's a good life lesson right there. I don't know if that's quite on topic, but Lisa, what you said, and David, what you said made me remember that moment.
No, that's very hurtful.
It was really hurt. It was really like, I'm a professional. I've been working for you. I've been trying to assist you in your career, and you can't make eye contact with me, and B, you turn away to rebuff my hand. It's like hurt. It really hurt.
This shows how our religions can get in the way of our hospitality, and how we can lose our chops when it comes to hospitality. And you graphically portrayed an experience, but I would dare say that many of us as Christians have done more damage to people's souls than perhaps we realize or are willing to recognize. And I'll never forget the Pulse shooting in Orlando. Can you believe that was 7 years ago now?
Wow.
We had at that time a man in our church whose partner went to Pulse regularly, and he just happened not to go that night, but it really impacted him, but it impacted all of us. And one of the reasons that it was so impactful, I think, is because it happened on a late Saturday night / Sunday morning. And so there was no way that we could go on with our Sunday gathering without being very aware of it. I mean, it was in our face. And I remember the thought that came to my mind, and I said this, I know most of you weren't there, but maybe Sally, I don't know. But I remember saying, wow, their church was violated. Mm-hmm. Because it was a place of love and hospitality that, I'm basically, gay clubs have been gay churches because the church couldn't be the church for gay people. And I just remember that. I remember that entire day. I just remember into the evening, and there was a vigil at De La Guerra Plaza, a park in the middle of Santa Barbara. Yeah, I'm just going to stop there, but it was a very moving day.
I want to also say, like, something that's always really bothered me is that saying that Christians use, love the sinner, hate the sin. Like that really bothers me. Like, it's like, I'll love the sort of way you present, but I'm going to hate the truth of you. And it's just, I don't know. That's just,
Or I'm gonna talk to you, but I'm looking down at you the whole time.
Yeah.
So does anybody see how rupturing binaries when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community can enhance our lives in every way? Just, when we look at reality, that doesn't always have to be judged and categorized. Roy's hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to respond to your immediate question, David, but I want to caution us that we don't embrace another duality. We keep using church with a capital C, and I think we're better served by using church as with a small c. Because while indeed the vast majority of churches have been not welcoming, that's not true of all of them. And we are an example of that, as we are who we are. And I think we need to be careful that we don't buy into that narrative that the church is not welcoming and then say, oh, but we are. I think we're better served by saying some churches aren't welcoming, but we are. And then the second piece of that whole question of hospitality is there is a place at which being hospitable means allowing the other to respond in the way they need to. A story of that, the church that Cheryl and I were part of in Albany, New York, it had queer folk in leadership since before Stonewall. We were recognized by the queer community as a safe space, to the point that the Gay Men's Choir of Albany, New York rehearsed in our space. And one of the things they did as part of that rehearsal was they agreed that they would sing in our worship service twice during every year. And there were 70 some voices in the choir, but the Sunday mornings when they came to sing for us, it usually was about between 25 and 30 that would come. And these were men who spent hours in that church building every week, but when it came to coming to a worship service, they had been so hurt that they couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. And we needed to say to them, even though they knew in their minds that it was a safe space, their hearts were still so savaged that they couldn't come to a church service. And so we needed to say to them, you know what, that's fine, we understand. And that was just one more way of being hospitable to them, letting them be who they needed to be and acknowledging their pain.
And then Kathleen had her hand up, and then Peter. I think you're muted, Kathleen.
Oh, gosh. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. I'm thinking about when David talked about breaking binary. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind is the base language of machines, like computers, is binary. But they're machines. We're not machines. We are made in the image of God. God is broader than any of us can possibly imagine. And he loves everyone. My heart was just breaking listening to those two songs, because the idea that somebody could think they are not welcome in heaven, because of their sexual preferences is so painful to me. And that has been put on them by the church largely. And I agree with Roy. There's quite a number of churches who are very accepting of the LGBT community, LGBTQ plus community. And I agree that there are churches who do accept, but there's so many who don't. You know, I have my brother's kids all accept the LGBTQ plus community and all the friends that I know. But up here, it's a different story. The younger people are still, you know, not all of them, but a lot of them are still taught in that way that says that homosexuality is wrong. And it's just a sad thing to see, because I don't know, almost all my life, I've had friends in that community. And I just can't imagine not having them and all the goodness they've brought to my life. And yes, I've loved them and hopefully brought something good to them, but I've received a lot, and I can't imagine living without that. It just seems like God's heart is for every person, not just this kind or that kind, it's everyone. Anyways, I preaching to the choir, probably saying that, but the binary thought was, we are not made to be binary, I don't believe.
Thanks, Kathleen.
So
Peter.
I just wanted to highlight something that I sort of stuck out to me, David, in your message, and just that, we, as churches, I don't think in a way, it's, what did you say, to microaggression? To even talk about how we are accepting of the community, and that gets reminded frequently, um, because I don't think we should need to say that. And I think, in a way, to me, that's sort of a message to the progressive church. Like, it's beyond just LGBTQ plus. It's to peoples of color. When we talk about we're welcoming to minorities of whatever part of our society, in a way, it's a microaggression to that group, saying that we need to acknowledge you, and that you're different, but we still accept you. I think that's, to me, that really stood out. And some of whether it's the LGBTQ or other people that maybe aren't represented in our community, maybe we may need to be conscientious about entering forums that they fit into, and not expect that they're going to come and meet us here. Anyway, just some thoughts.
That's good.
Yeah, definitely, Peter. It's almost like our standard, our normal is heterogeneity or whatever, or white churches or whatever, European churches. David, you brought up Richard Rohr's definition of binaries and dualistic thinking, and some of you maybe remember exactly how he worded it, but how he talks about like different stages of maturity and growth, and he actually says that there is a season of duality that everyone kind of goes through. It's almost like a way of them figuring out from like where they were before, and then what is in and what is out as far as God's way goes. But then pushing through that, we come to a place of greater maturity where the dualities and the binaries go away. And I just felt like that, just when I thought of that, when you brought him up, I just thought of that one verse, in 1 Corinthians, how we say, when Paul said, when I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. And then he talks about, we see through a glass dimly, all that stuff. But then, but now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. So I felt like, okay, there's like a scripture right there that supports what we're saying.
And Julia and Clint?
Sorry, Julia and Clint. But I was just going to say to Margie, those were, I have often quoted Richard Rohr, that statement, but I've restated it because I don't remember exactly the terms. But I would say, Richard Rohr said that we're all fundamentalists until we're not. And that was very helpful to me. I remember it was 2010 when I was still kicking myself for being a fundamentalist, if you will. And he just says, wherever you came from, you started out in binaries. But yeah, Julia, where'd you go?
I'm here. Good morning, everyone. I wanted to share that when my son first came here, I was trying to be open and honest and understand better kind of where his head is at, when I don't know, just trying to put myself in his shoes. And so I would ask questions, and at some point recently he says, Mom, it's like in the beginning it was okay that you were asking questions and trying to understand. But after a while, it's like, we're different. So we might not come to that understanding. There needs to be a place of acceptance. You know what I'm saying? So like when I get up in the morning and I decide I'm going to put boots on instead of sneakers, I don't need to explain that to anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it means to be heterosexual. What the hell does the shoes that I wear have anything to do with my sexual preference? So then who am I to ask questions like, mixing something feminine with something masculine? I don't get that. So, it's like it had to be put to me in a certain way. And just like you said, we started out with this binary thinking. We start out thinking a certain way, and then we try to open our minds, and after a while it's like, okay, just let people be, accept them, stop trying to open your mind and understand, and just take a deep breath and say hello, recognize a human being for a human being. So that was my thought. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Eli.
Yeah, that was one thing I always thought of with the David and Jonathan story. It's like, it's a perfect idea of people who just love each other, and it doesn't matter. And that's the whole beauty of it, is that you don't know what kind of love it is, but it shouldn't matter. It's like, if it was just brotherly love, then this is a great example of how men shouldn't be afraid to show that brotherly love to each other. And it's so funny because I'm gonna utilize something we probably all have seen, Friends. And I think the relationship between Joey and Chandler is a good example of that brotherly love, and how it doesn't matter, and how it could be sexual. And sometimes that was the joke, where it seemed like their relationship was so intimate that it could have been sexual, but it didn't happen to be. And I think we need to get to the point where I don't know who you're sleeping with, and it doesn't really affect my relationship to you, because if we're not sleeping together, then it doesn't matter. It's like, I don't even see why. I think the only reason it is a topic is because somebody decided that because they weren't like them, they were wrong to be like them. It was just another way to bully somebody because they're different from you. And bullies suck. And Danny Trejo says F bullies. And he says it very naturally. And he's right.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's bullying.
Oh, that's, when we see, as Peter was addressing, when we see an atmosphere of microaggressions for people that we presume are feeling accepted, that's bullying. It may be very subconscious and perhaps unintentional, but definitely it's bullying.
I took a anti-harassment, anti-bullying test when I worked for the Census Bureau. So it's a federal, job and stuff. And one of the anti-harassment, anti-bullying wings, anti-harassment was ignoring somebody. Like, how people that do the mean girl thing and shut people out.
Like Caroline experienced.
Harassment. That's considered harassment.
Yeah.
And under the federal government, it was actually part of the training. So,
well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa and Margie. And let's go ahead and let Kenichi take us to communion at this time.
Hi, everyone. Wow. If I may just add this, I was just discussing with Sayuri, especially I think after Julia was sharing her, relational engagement with Eli, how, they were responding. We don't need to keep explaining ourselves. I think the concept of queerness came to light, and we started sharing about, regarding cultural, ethnic background, worldview, how people who are from a different place, for instance, Asian, if there's one Asian American in a classroom, or one Black person in a classroom, and a question is posed to that person, the rest of the class tends to think that the one lone voice represents the entire people group, for instance. And so I was saying, that's a great example of being treated as a token, because people around don't realize that they cannot represent every voice of African Americans, or people of Asian descent, or etc. So that's another layer in our conversation about queerness. Having said that, I've been really thinking about this, and I think it's apropos here. Jesus the human couldn't possibly know everything. Yes, he's both God and human, but I think one of the ways, I remember him saying, the Holy Spirit will lead you in the way of truth, if you will. After I'm, it's profitable for me that I leave, because the spirit, or the energy, or the love that will come upon you will continue to reveal. And I want to say, perhaps reveal humanity, reveal creation, which are all evolving. And so perhaps what we are seeing is the evolution of humanity, the creativity and the expressions and the varied nuances of human expressions that we are seeing. And because we were so indoctrinated with binary thinking, and especially religion, the Western Christian religion, that we are having an exceptional hard time adopting this. And so, in light of that, as we think of Jesus's crucifixion, his broken body and shed blood, may we receive the grace to perhaps let go, or come to realization, those aspects even today, that we don't realize that's there, that still cause us to perhaps kind of lean into that binary thinking, because I don't know, and I won't be surprised if there are still traces of that's still lurking inside of my consciousness, because of that deep indoctrination that I have been, under. So with that, as we take the broken body of Christ right now, let us also breathe in the spirit that was released to allow to cleanse us, to purge us from anything that causes us to lean back to the duality, and to embrace the creativity and the evolution of humanity represented by Christ. So, broken body of Jesus. Shed blood of Christ. Amen.